After more than 70 years, the IRS has eliminated tax threats against churches speaking out about politics. And hundreds of abortion clinics may be closing thanks to the big, beautiful bill. Last but not least, a major university is apologizing to every female athlete forced to compete against a man. We're going to unpack all of these key victories on a national scale and what they mean for Virginia, plus how you can help seize this moment for truth. From the Family Foundation, I'm your host, Candi Cushman, with our president, Victoria Cobb. Well, welcome everyone. Glad to have you with us for another episode of Speak Up Virginia. Remember, if you want your friends to hear what we're talking about, share the playlist on YouTube, Speak Up Virginia playlist. You can find that on our Family Foundation YouTube channel and also get there at familyfoundation.org. So with that said, let's jump right in. You know, Victoria, I just wanted to talk about something we hadn't actually planned to talk about because I heard this driving into work today on the news, and that's this New Hampshire judge that is trying to counter Trump's whole birthright, controversy over whether they can determine that people that
citizenship.
Yes, the citizenship thing. So this judge granted class action status to unborn children. In other words, he said we could confer rights on children that are unborn. Imagine that.
This is very interesting because I imagine there's been many attempts in pro-life history and other ways to try to have unborn children actually get standing to be able to be the litigant in court. That's very, very interesting. What I like about this is the left is doing all sorts of things, actually, in order to stop Trump. They're actually adopting a lot of our principles. My husband and I were talking about this the other day. Here's a different one. Now, this one's yours is much bigger. But the one we were talking about the other day is you now have cities that have been really big on red light cameras and license plate readers, and they want to, big government. And all of a sudden, because it could be used by ICE, we're seeing like the left kind of peel back from all the big government stuff. And I'm thinking, man, if we can get the left-wing government control people to start going, no, we don't need cameras everywhere and license plate reader, that would be, but yours is a lot bigger because if we could actually get unborn children to have standing, that would be, that would change the entire pro-life argument.
Because I'm driving in hearing the ACLU attorney arguing on the steps of the court that this is going to protect babies everywhere.
Oh, I like it even better that the ACLU is involved. That's perfect.
I'm thinking the ACLU is speaking up for unborn babies right now.
The ACLU actually used to have some principles, and now they just have outcomes they want, and they're willing to go whichever direction to get them to the outcome.
Well, they can't have it both ways. So hopefully we can hold them to this one.
I would love to use it in their face later.
All right. Well, getting back to kind of what we planned to talk about, and that was that there's been a lot of huge federal news coming out. And I just wanted to give you, Victoria, a chance to talk about how this might be impacting Virginia. What are the takeaways? And the first big thing was this news that the IRS is backing off the threats that we have lived under for years in the church world, that we're going to lose our tax-exempt status if your church tries to draw a connection between candidates and biblical principles. They lived under the terror of losing their tax-exempt status, and they're saying that threat does not exist anymore. Tell us, what is the big takeaway from this?
Yeah, it's really amazing. The National Religious Broadcasters and Intercessors for America, they brought a case, and we finally have the IRS on record because we had this Johnson Amendment that just everybody lived in fear, to your point, and I think it took churches to places beyond where I think it created a chilling effect, not just the literal you can't endorse, but it gave them the feel of we can't ever talk about any of these issues. They took it, pastors tended to take it to really far extremes. And so the takeaway is that, and it needs to be noted that it's really about, what the IRS said and what they agreed to is basically that when a pastor talks to a congregation, they talk about all sorts of things, politics included, and that it's more like a family discussion, that you're more like at the dinner table than you are trying to host a political event. And so, there is some notes to, this isn't necessarily saying churches should go hold political rallies. There's still sort of some I think some common sense here that needs to be applied, but it's very clear a pastor can say, look, in the context of our family, as brothers and sisters in the Lord, like this is what we see, and this is where we see a candidate exhibiting righteousness or where we think they might be the better choice. That's a big deal. So takeaway is pastors ought to be more comfortable doing that than they have been. Now, what we're going to find out, truthfully, is whether this is what has been holding back pastors or whether this has been the excuse that they have used to not ever endorse a candidate. I don't know. We'll find out.
That excuse is gone. And a lot of pastors also were even just backing away from even just talking about, sexuality and life issues and how that tied to what's going on at the ballot box. They weren't even talking about that, or even just basic voter education.
Yeah. I think this will absolutely allow us to have better conversations with clergy about the importance of, particularly as we have amendments coming up and all sorts of things across Virginia. Every day, our pastors are out talking to other pastors, and this just helps clarify things, I think, even more so, even when you're not talking about candidates. This is not political. This is a family discussion.
And I feel like this is a big deal because since I was born, this is what I've heard
Amendment's
about.
been around for decades, and this is all we've ever heard. And hats off to our friend Mike Ferris and others who were involved in this lawsuit to trigger this, because this is what we've needed.
Okay, so a couple of questions.
Yeah.
You kind of alluded to this, but do you think we will see more churches having courage to say, these are our biblical beliefs on life, marriage, and family, parental rights, and this candidate doesn't align? Will there be more churches stepping out on that?
It's a great question. There's always been a little bit of a divide, honestly, because there are some churches that tend to be more on the left side of things that are willing to be very aggressive and have always been very political. I think those churches will keep going. The question is, will the ones that have been very hesitant step forward? I don't know. I think we'll have some. I think we'll have some who honestly have wanted to say more but have been a little bit reticent just because they want to follow the law also. Be a good citizen.
And we will be there with tools to help churches provide that kind of education. We're already ready with our voter guide coming out later in August. We're on top of that part, and our legal team to help kind of get through what this means, help churches navigate that. But also, I wanted to know the way this, so it was interesting, the way that this happened was, I guess, like a consent decree where they signed, the IRS signed an agreement with the judge, and but initially the lawsuit was brought on behalf of 2 Texas churches and a Christian broadcasting network. So it looks like maybe, is this only applying to churches? Is this going to apply to other bigger, like Christian radio stations or even groups like ours?
That's a good question. National Religious Broadcasters was one of the, that was the main party in this. But I don't know if they were doing it on behalf of all broadcasters. I think we're going to have to read a little deeply. There's also more of a ruling to come out. So this was there's more we should hear about this.
Right.
So I'd be interested to see exactly how broad does it apply. But it is incredibly important that this was finally undertaken, because for years, just maybe our audience doesn't know this, but there's been something called the Pulpit Project for forever, where I at least the last 15 years, where groups like Alliance Defending Freedom and others were encouraging churches to give a sermon that would be considered political and send it to the IRS to try to trigger this. They wanted the IRS to complain so that they could have standing to then go against them. So and the IRS never took the bait, because they knew this is a freedom of speech issue, freedom of religion. They knew they were absolutely, that the Johnson Amendment wasn't going to stand up under the U.S. Constitution, but they didn't want to have to.
So this does kind of formalize the way the IRS was handling it all along. They
didn't really actually want to get into fights with churches over this, because they didn't want to end up in court.
And we know that left-wing churches, we've seen them invite the candidates in the pulpit, take over the whole church service.
And to be honest, the church has played a role. Think about the black church and the role of the black church in bringing us to a place where we have, in the slavery issues, in civil rights issues. They played a big role by being what IRS might have said in the past, political, but actually just addressing issues of morality of the day and saying, do something about it. We need the church to be that voice. That's important. So I'm glad for this, and I hope it does prompt a little bit better, more comfortable discussions, at least on the issues.
All right, so we're going to still be unpacking that, but we know for now it's clear churches have that freedom.
Yes.
But moving ahead to the next topic, I did want to talk to you about the big, beautiful bill. And there's been a ton of coverage on that, so I'm not going to go into all the aspects. We can talk about some of that in the future, like education, freedom, and that kind of thing. But today, I just wanted to zone in on the defunding of Planned Parenthood. Bring us up to speed on that real quick.
Yeah, I mean, there were lots of discussions as this bill was going along, what's going to be in it and what's going to stay in it. One of the big hot items was, are we going to defund Planned Parenthood and, stop sending our money towards abortion? And we did get a victory out of this, and it is a massive victory. It is technically only for a year, so I do need people to understand it's not a permanent defunding, but just getting the camel's nose under the tent. And in this case, I'm using it in a positive way, but we haven't been able to do that ever. And so to just stop the stream of funding, and it is a significant stream of funding because it comes through the Medicaid reimbursement situation, and it is millions, hundreds of millions of dollars.
So it could be reauthorized.
Yes, it
in
could
a year.
Absolutely, yes, but it just isn't necessarily going to last.
What do you think of
into
this?
Perpetuity or anything?
Because I saw other pro-life groups out there, Susan B. Anthony for one, saying that it's the greatest pro-life victory since Dobbs. Do you think it's on that scale?
Honestly, it's at least that scale. Now, that sounds like a huge statement when I say it's all like it's either the same or maybe even more important than Dobbs, because the stream of funding is what is underwriting everything that industry does. It is so significant, and we hear it because Planned Parenthood right now is reacting, and they're saying we're going to have to close hundreds of clinics. Well, you close hundreds of clinics, that reduces the volume of abortion. We know this from just certain states that have reduced the number of clinics. We've been able to see the volume of abortion go down. And this was true even in states that had things like some safety standards and things prior to Dobbs. When there are fewer clinics, there have been fewer abortions. Chemical abortion obviously weighs into that.
Yeah.
It's a little bit more nuanced these days. But that's really significant. And what I've never understood is in moments where we've had, and I'm going to put this in party politics terms, in moments where we've had Republican control, I've never understood why it wasn't done. And the reason I put it in party politics terms is because Planned Parenthood is such a political entity, and they go after Republican candidates. I've never understood why you would want your opponents to be so well funded by government that they have all this spare money, floating around. You pay for the lights and you pay for the, operational stuff so that all their fundraising can be about the politics. If you don't have to raise money to underwrite your services, then you're raising money to underwrite your political campaigns. I just from a sheer political battle thing, I've never understood why it's so hard to get this done.
Yeah, and let's just put this in context for people, because Planned Parenthood is the gorilla in the room when it comes to the abortion industry. And I'm looking at figures here. They're responsible for over 400,000 abortions a year in this country. And then they're raking in more than $700 million right now in taxpayer funding. And to your point of why Republicans have not followed through on this in the past, I mean, we know from polls that the majority of the public does not want to subsidize. They don't want to subsidize abortions.
Yeah. And Planned Parenthood is the leading provider. And they are, the thing that I think politicians have been a little afraid to touch is that somehow their name brand has been favorably viewed in the public. This has been a problem for pro-life for a long time. Somehow the public actually buys what they claim to sell, which is they claim they're about healthcare. They claim they're beyond abortion. They are, look at their actual expenses. They are all about abortion. They wouldn't have to close clinics. Like if this was funding that is funding for abortions and we dry that up and they did all this other services, they wouldn't be closing clinics. They are all about abortion. But somehow the public has sort of bought this larger healthcare. And so I think politicians have been a little afraid to touch that in the past. And we've tried, at the state level, we've tried to do some things, backtrack, 10 years ago when we had, more conservatives in our legislature. Defunding, all we tried to do was move those kind of funds over to, if they're truly doing healthcare, put those funds in federally funded health clinics.
Yeah.
Put the funds into what we all agree are sort of these public health entities. Or Planned Parenthood could just stop doing abortion, do all the rest of their services. We'd be all, actually these days they do so many harmful services that actually wouldn't be okay. But we used to years before they did gender care and all the gender care and all the terrible things they do. We used to say, okay, if it's not all about abortion, just go do your, STD testing or whatever they claim they do. But
well, and I think this cut is happening through Medicaid, which on the surface is more general. And they are making those arguments right now. People will see them out there, oh, we're going to not be able to provide the STD testing and general health care. But like you said, if you're paying for their overhead, then you are subsidizing the abortion industry.
I understand you can line item things, but it overall keeps them. And I think it was Kristen Hawkins, maybe Students for Life, or one of those, maybe it was Lila Rose, one of those entities put out on their social media. So if they have to close all these clinics because they don't have government funding, like if they're not sustainable without government funding, does that make them non-viable? I thought that was hysterical, given that we constantly debate about viability. Maybe Planned Parenthood is non-viable and therefore ought to be.
All right. So my question is, how does it affect Virginia? Because this is also coming on the heels of that Supreme Court ruling, Medina, where it gave states the freedom to defund Planned Parenthood through Medicaid.
Yeah, we'd really love to see Virginia move forward and take the state-based approach as well. There's no reason we should be funding abortion with our state dollars or our federal dollars. I think the public is behind that. It's just getting the elected officials to line up with their constituency.
So another reason people need to be aware of the
elections
voter guide.
This year.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so I just want to give a plug for that. Go to our website, familyfoundation.org. You'll see that we have a voter report card up there right now. In August, later in August, we're coming out with the voter guide that's going to address the life issue. And also, we have a banner about stopping the amendment to enshrine unlimited abortion. If you go to the website, familyfoundation.org, and you can get information on how to join that battle now. So I'm just going to move right on to our next topic here. And that is just some jaw-dropping reversals going on the transgender policies in our nation. It really has been stunning. And first of all, there was this groundbreaking Federal Trade Commission hearing. And this is really interesting because my understanding is the Federal Trade Commission has the authority to do these investigations to look into if there's fraud or deceptive practices in advertising with these different trade groups. And so you've got this so-called gender-affirming industry, and there was a whole hearing on how are they having deceptive practices?
Yeah, I think this is amazing, not simply because a hearing happened, but because a hearing happened at the FTC instead of in the context of like the health department or NIH or something like that, because that's how we think of these issues. But truly, it is, we have argued for a long time, this is a product being sold, it's a bill of goods that is not, it is truly harmful, and it is being sort of hoisted upon our young people by way of their counselors, some doctors, and really, I would argue, probably the big pharma,
school
like
counselors,
the hormones, and those that make money off of this
pharma,
are making a lot.
Yeah.
Pharma, I mean, they're making money off of it, and it goes through Planned Parenthood, and they make money on the deal and the whole thing. And so I loved not just that there was a hearing, but that it was really about the fraud issue. That was the purpose of the hearing: is this truly junk science being forced upon our kids? Because
they are telling them, if you transition and destroy your natural body organs, inject all these hormones, your mental angst will go away.
Correct.
So, and if you need further evidence of this, just listen to these really compelling testimonies in the hearing. I don't know how you could listen to them and have doubts about this. So I'm just going to let you hear. We put some excerpts together. I mean, this was a several hours long hearing, so we've just kind of clipped together some of the most compelling testimony that day of many. And the first is you'll hear a voice of a mom, Elvira Syed, who tragically lost her daughter to suicide after her daughter was pushed down this so-called gender transition path. And then the next person you'll hear is a young person, Claire Abernathy, who found herself also being pushed down this path in middle school. So let's just listen to what they have to say.
Eileen was exceptional. Despite being on autism spectrum, she spoke 4 languages, played 5 instruments, held 2 black belts in martial arts, and earned a full tuition scholarship to Reika University. But behind all those accomplishments was a young woman silently battling anxiety, depression, trauma, and self-harm. especially after losing a father to cancer at age 12. My insurance was charged for this against my will. When I saw this pharmacy alert, I was horrified. Testosterone can increase aggression, emotional numbness, and suicidal thoughts, especially in a vulnerable, unstable teen. But no one stopped to ask if it was safe. On just her second visit, APRN increased her dose to 60 milligrams per week, even though her chart noted worsening side effects like acne and bleeding. Her testosterone level at that point was 289. For reference, the normal female range does not exceed 45. In October 2024, my daughter died by suicide. She overdosed on Benadryl. Her body lay in her dorm for 4 days before anyone found her. The school waited another day to call me. During that time, they were celebrating National Coming Out Day. The autopsy revealed new self-harm wounds on her thighs. According to the detective report, her friends said Eileen's depression was getting worse. She was struggling, and she was having difficulty with transition. Those entrusted with her care didn't treat her depression. They didn't explore what was underneath the identity. They didn't even tell me what was going on. They treated her ideology, not her illness.
I hadn't even learned algebra in high school yet. But I was old enough to choose to have healthy parts of my body electively amputated. I was sold a product, medical transition, by professionals and institutions who told me that it would fix my distress and save my life. I was told that if I didn't do this, I would probably end up dead. But here's what they didn't tell me. They didn't tell me that taking cross-sex hormones and undergoing major surgery at 14 years old could leave me with pelvic floor dysfunction and urinary incontinence, problems I have to manage now as a young adult. I'm only 20 years old. They didn't tell me that these complications are common enough to be known risks, and yet they were hidden from me at an age where I didn't even understand what these terms meant. Think about that. A surgeon permanently altered my healthy body when I was a middle school student, and then erased my negative feedback to protect his reputation. If that doesn't sound like fraud, I don't know what does.
Well, sadly, Victoria, those stories are so heartbreaking, but they're not isolated events.
Well, I mean, there's some that have been really outspoken that I think most folks have heard of at this point. You know, you have Chloe Cole out there talking. You have Sage Blair, who we've highlighted here before in her story in Virginia. And this hearing went on for hours and had many testimonies. We're going to put the link in the show notes so people, I really think there's a lot of value to hearing the kinds of testimonies that were just over and over again about this. But yes, the stories
from medical professionals.
Yes,
that we
they
didn't
had
have time
medical
to
professionals.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just a very well put together hearing. And I want to note about this, this mom that's up there talking about her poor child that committed suicide. The irony of it is many of these previous speakers, if you watch the whole thing, reference that line that these doctors and counselors give to parents that say, do you want a fill in the blank, live daughter or a dead son, if your son is thinking about transitioning. And they literally make suicide the emotional manipulation to force the parent to get on the train and let this kid transition their body into another, into what they think, will feel like the opposite gender. And the irony of this is the line they give them, and yet we see that their route is no better, that the kids still have mental anguish and in some cases tragically take their own lives.
Yeah, and I heard one of the detransitioners make the point, I actually worry about more suicide risk when kids realize they can't reverse what has been done to them. They can't get it back. They can't get the ability to have a child back. They were more concerned about that risk.
And that's why we're so careful with children to always have adult consent, adult involvement, parental involvement in anything that they do before their brains are fully developed. Because kids cannot comprehend, and they're not being told, even if they could, they're not being told the truth by a lot of the medical professionals about this. But it's just tragic that we have kids who think this is going to solve, they're being told that these, fill in the blank, drugs, surgeries, they're going to solve my confusion, solve my anxiety. I will be forever fixed. And the reality is you'll be forever a medical patient who can't change their mind, who still probably has anguish over all sorts of these issues. And so
I think it's important to keep getting the truth out as much as possible. Let's stand alongside these whistleblowers. So share that, share this podcast, share that link to the FTC hearing. We've got a testimony from Chloe Cole on our podcast list. You can share that. Let's keep getting the word out. But let's move on to this other really stunning reversal, and that is the University of Pennsylvania is actually issuing apology letters, statements, apologies to these girls who were forced to lose their titles to biological men in girls' sports and have their privacy violated.
I mean, wow. I mean, what an amazing thing that not only have we kind of got an administration pushing on all these schools to stop letting boys in girls' sports, but now we've got them taking the next step and saying, no, you need to go back and fix. You're never going to be able to perfectly fix what was lost. And I think that has to be noted, that there are kids who lost their spots to compete in championships, and we'll mention one of those. There are those that literally, I mean, what you lose in that moment can't be restored. But I appreciate that now they're having to at least apologize and sort of go back and attempt to wipe the titles away from this biological male.
There's a whole list of things that they have to do, and it really is pretty amazing. So they've made a commitment that they're going to keep biological males out of women's sports in the future. They are restoring all those lost titles to the girls, at least at the college level.
Yes.
Like you say, these are building blocks, so you can't restore what they missed out at the national level, because the college is a building block to that. But at least at the University of Pennsylvania level, they'll have their titles restored. Yeah. What else are they doing here? And they're acknowledging the definition of male and female. So
that alone, to get University of Pennsylvania, I mean, these liberal schools struggle with that. So I think that alone is a pretty big win.
So there's no doubt that the Trump administration is, really having earth-shattering impact in this realm, because they haven't been afraid to go after the funding. So I do think one reason the school complied with this is because they did have some $175 million at stake that had been frozen by the Trump administration.
I always thought it was so crazy that our athletes, especially the higher the level you go, right? College, certainly when you're testing for the Olympics, those guys are being drug tested at a certain point to not have steroids and other things. And I always thought it was crazy that you could have done all this to somebody's body through steroids and those kind of things, through hormones, and then let them compete. But you're going to drug test somebody else and make sure that they have nothing in their system that would affect their natural ability.
So true.
I mean, it just was always crazy. So I just love seeing UPenn have to eat their entire, ridiculous direction that they went.
Well, just to kind of bring this home, some of our listeners might remember just recently we did an exclusive interview with a Virginia swimmer, Reika George, who was at Virginia Tech, and she is leading the battle right now to protect girls' sports in Virginia.
Yes.
But what motivated her was she was one of these people that had this whole experience that kind of created the spotlight on University of Pennsylvania and others, and that's when the biological male Leah Thomas, he was going by Leah Thomas, ended up taking a trophy from Riley Gaines, and Reika George, you guys that listen to this will remember that she lost a spot in national finals to Leah Thomas by one spot. That's something she can't get back.
She'll never get that back.
Yeah. So but I'm glad we have some sort of justice, for these women. But she continues battling for the sake of the women here in Virginia. So if you want to be a part of coming alongside her and also other swimmers from Roanoke College that have spoken out, Victoria, tell us real quick how they can weigh in with what's going on with the Virginia Board of Health right now.
Yeah, I mean, we are trying to, there has been a petition put forward by Reika and others to the Board of Health to have them set regulations that would essentially remove boys from girls' sports, that would keep them out of locker rooms and private spaces and not taking their championships. And so we have on our website, we've got a banner that people can go to, because you have, there was a period of public comment. There will be another hearing, and essentially we're going to want folks to be supporting. We haven't gotten the date of the next hearing, so I can't say on this day, but we're going to want people to be really supporting this effort, maybe showing up. We'll probably try to fill the room. Stay tuned on that front and stay zoned into that page that kind of tells you about that.
Yeah, many of you signed a petition in support, and now the ball is in the Virginia Board of Health's court. So that page has all of their emails where you can email them to please take action on this. And we're thinking the next action will probably be in Richmond. So we'll let you know when you can come up and stand behind these girls. So with that said, let me just remind you again, go to our website, familyfoundation.org. Look for the Save Girls Sports banner, familyfoundation.org. Thank you for joining us today. We covered a lot, but hopefully you are encouraged that there is some momentum for restoring truth and justice in this country, and we need to keep standing alongside our girls with truth and compassion. So remember, we are stronger when we speak together. Make sure to share this with others at the Speak Up Virginia playlist on YouTube, and we'll see you next time.